Okay, so you want to buy a golf course. 18 holes, rolling green fairways, a clubhouse with a bar, members paying you dues every single month just for the right to walk across your grass. You barely have to do anything. The grass grows on its own, the members show up on their own, and you sit in the clubhouse collecting checks while people play a game on land you own. Sounds simple. It is not simple. And the story of how golf courses actually make money and how they actually die is one of the strangest stories in all of real estate. Because the thing you are buying is not really a business at all. It is a farm. A very expensive farm that grows a crop nobody eats, that must be harvested 3 times a week, and that dies the moment you stop feeding it. Before you make a single dollar, you need to survive buying the thing or building it. Building a golf course from raw land is not a construction project the way a building is a construction project. It is a land-shaping operation. You are moving earth, sometimes hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of it, to create hills that were never there, ponds that never existed, and drainage systems that decide whether your investment survives its first heavy spring. Then, you install an irrigation system with miles of buried pipe and hundreds of sprinkler heads, each one individually controlled. Then you build cart paths, bridges, bunkers filled with sand that has to be trucked in from somewhere specific, greens constructed in engineered layers of gravel and sand and root zone mix, and a clubhouse that has to look like a place people want to drink in. Building a mid-range public course can run somewhere between $3 and $8 million. A high-end private course, on good land, with a serious architect's name attached to it, can run north of $20 million before a single member has paid a single dollar of dues. The land alone, if you are anywhere near a growing city, can cost more than everything else combined. Buying an existing course is usually cheaper up front, and that is where things get interesting, because not all golf courses are the same golf course. There is an enormous gap in this industry between the top of the market and everything below it. A high-end private club near a wealthy suburb, with a waiting list, a full membership roster, and a name people recognize, trades for a price that reflects stable, predictable, recurring income. Those change hands for tens of millions of dollars. Then there are the courses 2 or 3 tiers down. Older layouts, dated clubhouses, aging membership, a shrinking town nearby. Some of these have sold for less than the cost of the irrigation system buried underneath them. Courses have traded hands in the United States for under $1 million. Some have sold for a few $100,000. There are documented cases of struggling courses selling for a single dollar, with the buyer simply agreeing to take on the debt and the maintenance obligations, because the seller wanted out badly enough that giving the property away was cheaper than continuing to own it. Read that again. There is a category of real estate where the land, the buildings, and the equipment can be worth less than nothing, because the cost of keeping it alive exceeds anything it can produce. That happens for a very specific reason, and we will get to it. So here's the first thing nobody tells you when they picture owning a golf course. You are not buying a business. You are buying an obligation. The grass does not care whether anyone played today. The irrigation still runs. The mowing still happens. And the price tag tells you almost everything about which side of that equation you are standing on. Say you have settled on a course and the purchase price seems reasonable. Before you collect a single green fee, there is a layer of costs that catches almost every new owner off guard. First, there is the equipment. A golf course is a fleet operation, and most people never think about this at all. You need greens mowers, fairway mowers, rough mowers, tee mowers, bunker rakes, sprayers, utility vehicles, aerators, top dressers, and a fleet of golf carts. A single fairway mower can cost $60,000 to $80,000. A greens mower runs $30,000 to $40,000. A fleet of 70 golf carts, which most courses lease rather than buy for exactly this reason, represents hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment that wears out on a fixed schedule regardless of how many rounds you sell. Walk into the maintenance barn of a mid-sized course, and you are looking at somewhere around $1 million of machinery sitting on a concrete floor, all of it depreciating, all of it needing parts. Second, There is deferred maintenance, and on a golf course, deferred maintenance is invisible until it is catastrophic. Irrigation systems have a lifespan of roughly 25 to 30 years. When they fail, they do not fail politely. They fail as a pipe bursting under the 14th fairway in July. A full irrigation replacement on an 18-hole course costs somewhere between $1 and $3 million, and there is no version of the job where you do half of it. Greens have a lifespan too. Rebuilding a single green properly costs tens of thousands of dollars, and a course with 18 aging greens is carrying a bill it has not been handed yet. If the previous owner was cutting corners to keep the cash flow looking healthy on paper, you find out about it the first summer you own the place, usually in the form of a very large repair bill and 18 holes of brown grass. Third, and this is the one that ends people, there is the membership structure you inherit. At many private clubs, members do not just pay dues. They pay an initiation deposit when they join, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. And under the club's own bylaws, that deposit is refundable after a set number of years, often 30. Those documents were written in a different era, when everyone assumed the waiting list would never shrink, and new members would always be arriving to fund the refunds of the old ones. You inherit whatever promises the last owner made, good or bad. And when a club's membership stops growing, those refund obligations do not go away. They simply arrive on a schedule you did not set, from people you never sold anything to. That is the trapdoor under the floor. The course looks healthy on the day you sign the papers. But the moment the membership stops growing, the whole financial structure underneath it can shift without you doing anything at all. Here is where it gets interesting, because the way a golf course makes money is more layered than most people realize. The first and simplest layer is green fees. Somebody pays a price to play 18 holes. On a public course, this might be $30 to $60 on a weekday, and considerably more on a weekend morning. This is the number everyone pictures. It is also, at most courses, not the most important number. The second layer is membership dues, and at a private club, this is the entire engine. Members pay a monthly or annual amount, whether they play 40 rounds that year or 4. Dues at a mid-tier private club might run $400 to $800 a month. At a high-end club, several thousand. The critical feature of dues is not the size. It is the predictability. Dues arrive in February when the course is frozen and nobody has swung a club in 3 months. Green fees do not. The third layer is the golf cart. This is one of the most underappreciated revenue lines in the entire industry. A cart rental might cost $20 per rider for 18 holes, 2 riders per cart, 30 carts going out on a busy morning, and that is over $1,000 from a fleet you already own, on a round that was going to happen anyway. Cart revenue at many courses is not a side item. It is a meaningful percentage of what the golf operation actually clears, because the marginal cost of one more cart going out is essentially the electricity to charge it. The fourth layer is food and beverage, and this is where the shape of the business changes completely. The clubhouse restaurant, the bar, the halfway house at the turn, the beverage cart driving the fairways. A golfer finishing 18 holes on a hot Saturday is a customer with 4 hours of accumulated thirst standing directly in front of a bar with nowhere else to go. Beverage margins in that position are extraordinary, but the real money in food and beverage is not the golfers at all. It is the weddings. A clubhouse with a view over a green valley, a large room, a kitchen, and a parking lot is a wedding venue that happens to have a golf course attached to it. Courses run banquets, corporate outings, charity scrambles, holiday parties, and funerals. A single corporate outing can put 140 players on the course, all paying, all eating, all drinking, on a Wednesday in June when the course would otherwise have sold 40 rounds. Then there is a fifth category that most people never think about at all. The pro shop, selling clubs and gloves and balls and shirts with your logo on them. Lessons, where a teaching professional pays you for the right to use your range, or works for you and splits the revenue. The driving range itself, which is the highest margin square footage on the entire property, because you are selling a bucket of balls you already own, hit into a field you already mow by someone who is not occupying a tee time. Range balls are, per dollar of revenue, cheaper to produce than almost anything else on the property. There is a counterintuitive detail hiding inside all of this worth pointing out. The golf course itself, the thing everybody drives past and thinks of as the business, is often the least profitable part of the property. It is the most expensive thing to maintain. It consumes nearly all of the water, nearly all of the labor, and nearly all of the machinery. And it produces revenue only when the weather cooperates, and only during daylight. The clubhouse, which takes up a fraction of the acreage, can generate margins the course will never touch. Many owners have quietly discovered that they own a hospitality business with a very large, very demanding garden in front of it. The garden is why people come. The garden is not where the money is. So far, the course sounds like a machine that prints money from 5 different directions at once. Now here is the other side of the ledger. Maintenance is the defining cost of this industry, and there is nothing else quite like it. Maintaining an 18-hole course properly costs somewhere between $500,000 and $1.5 million per year, and at the very top end of the market, it goes far beyond that. That number covers a superintendent, an assistant, a mechanic, and a crew of a dozen or more people who arrive before sunrise, every day, in season, to mow greens that are cut to a height measured in thousandths of an inch. Greens are mowed daily, fairways several times a week. Bunkers raked, rough cut, tees moved, holes changed, irrigation adjusted. The crop must be harvested constantly, and it grows back overnight. Then there is water, which is the single most existential line item on the list. A golf course in a dry climate can consume hundreds of thousands of gallons a day in peak summer. Where water is cheap, this is an expense. Where water is scarce or regulated, this is a threat to the existence of the business itself. Courses in drought regions have faced municipal restrictions that simply told them how much water they were allowed to use. And the answer was less than the grass needs to live. There is no negotiating with that. Then chemicals and fertilizer, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year at a serious club. Because a green mowed that short is a plant kept permanently on the edge of death, and keeping it alive requires constant intervention. Then, property tax on a very large piece of land. Insurance, which has been climbing sharply across the entire industry. Clubhouse utilities, equipment leases, and debt service on whatever you borrowed to buy the place. And here is the detail that catches new owners off guard. Almost none of this shrinks when business is slow. This is the structural fact underneath the entire industry. The grass does not know how many rounds you sold. A course running at 40% of its capacity costs very nearly the same to maintain as a course running at 90%, because the mowing schedule, the irrigation schedule, the fertilizer schedule, and the crew are all determined by biology, not by demand. Rain for 2 straight weekends in June does not reduce your costs by a single dollar. It only removes the revenue. The expenses are set by the calendar and the weather. The income is set by whether anybody feels like playing. And here is the trap almost nobody sees coming until they own the place. Even a busy course can lose money if the mix is wrong. This is the counterintuitive part. It is not about how many people are on the property. It is about who is paying what. A course can look packed on a Saturday and be full of discounted tee times sold through third-party booking platforms at a fraction of the rack rate, and league players on flat annual passes, and members whose dues have not risen in 6 years because the board is made up of members who vote on their own dues. The parking lot is full. The cash flow is not. Rounds played is not the same thing as income. That distinction is where a lot of golf course owners get into serious trouble. Before we get to how courses die, it is worth understanding something the industry figured out decades ago, because it explains almost everything about how these properties get built. For most of the last 50 years, the most profitable thing a golf course did had nothing to do with golf. It was real estate. A developer would buy a large piece of raw land cheaply, build a golf course through the middle of it, and then sell the lots surrounding the fairways at a very large premium, because a house that backs onto a green corridor is worth substantially more than the identical house backing onto another house. The golf course was not the product. The golf course was the amenity that made the product expensive. Developers routinely accepted that the course itself would barely break even or lose money outright, because the lots paid for everything and then some. Then, once every lot was sold, the developer's job was finished. The course was often handed to the homeowners or sold to an operator, and the entity that now owned it had to make it work as an actual standalone business for the first time in its life. It had never been designed to do that. It had been designed to sell houses, and it had already sold them all. That is the structural truth underneath a huge portion of this industry. Thousands of golf courses in the United States were never businesses. They were marketing expenses that outlived the campaign. Now here is what happened when that model met arithmetic. Through the 1990s and into the early 2000s, the United States built golf courses at a pace of hundreds per year. In some years, more than 300 new courses opened. The assumption underneath all of that construction was that participation would keep growing forever, because it had been growing, and because a very famous young player had just made the sport appear on television in a way it never had before. Then participation stopped growing, and the supply that had been built for a rising market was standing in a flat one. What followed was a slow, grinding correction that has now run for the better part of 2 decades. Since roughly 2006, the United States has closed more golf courses than it has opened. Every single year, hundreds of courses have closed. The National Golf Foundation has spent years describing this as a supply correction, which is an accurate and very gentle way of saying that a large number of these properties were never viable, and the market took that long to find out. To understand how this plays out in the real world, it helps to look at what actually happens to a course when it dies, because it is not like other real estate. A course in decline follows a recognizable sequence, and every step makes the next one more likely. It begins with a slow decline in members or rounds, often for reasons entirely outside the owner's control. The membership ages. The town shrinks. A newer course opens 20 minutes away. Revenue drops a few percent. The owner, needing to protect cash flow, cuts the maintenance budget, because maintenance is the only large expense that can be cut quickly. The crew shrinks. Mowing frequency drops. Bunkers get raked less. The fertilizer program gets scaled back. And the golfers notice. They notice immediately, because golfers are the most attentive customers in any industry on Earth regarding the surface conditions of the product they are buying. Conditions decline, so more members leave, so revenue drops further, so maintenance gets cut again. The irrigation repair gets deferred. Then a summer arrives hot and dry, and the deferred irrigation fails. And now there are brown patches on the fairways. And the course that people used to be proud to bring guests to is a course they apologize for. More members leave. This is the death spiral, and once it has genuine momentum, almost nothing reverses it, because reversing it requires spending money exactly when there is none. Then the course closes, and here is where golf becomes genuinely strange as an asset. When a mall closes, the building sits there, empty but intact. When a golf course closes, the land immediately begins to do something no other commercial property does. It grows. Within 1 season, the fairways are waist-high. Within 2, the bunkers are full of weeds, and the greens are indistinguishable from the rough. Within 5, young trees are coming up through the 18th fairway. The property does not sit empty. It actively converts itself back into a field, and the cost to bring it back rises every month it sits. Meanwhile, the owner still owes property tax on 150 acres of land inside a residential area. And so, the obvious answer is to sell it to a housing developer. Except the land is often zoned as open space or recreational, and rezoning it requires a public hearing. And at that public hearing sit 200 homeowners who paid a premium specifically for a house on a golf course, who are now being told that their view is going to become 40 houses. These fights are brutal. They go on for years, and they end in court more often than not. Some closed courses have sat in rezoning litigation for a decade or more, generating nothing, growing wild, while everyone involved spends money on lawyers. Keep this in mind if you ever think a full parking lot means a safe course. The line between healthy and gone is not one dramatic event. It is a sequence of small ones, each one making the next one more likely, and most of them are decisions the owner made for entirely rational reasons at the time. The slow correction did not happen in a vacuum. It happened alongside a genuine change in what people were willing to spend time on. Golf's core product was never really the swing. It was 5 hours. 5 hours of a weekend, plus travel, plus the bar afterward. That was the entire ask. And for decades, a large number of people were willing to pay it. Then, the pool of people willing to surrender 5 hours on a Saturday shrank for reasons that had nothing to do with golf and everything to do with how households and weekends changed. The courses that struggled most were often the ones stuck in the middle, not exclusive enough to sell an experience people could not get elsewhere, and not cheap or fast enough to compete for casual players against everything else competing for the same afternoon. Then something genuinely unexpected happened, and it is worth being honest about it. The pandemic handed golf a gift. It was one of the very few activities that was outdoors, distanced by design, and permitted almost everywhere. Rounds played surged. Courses that had been quietly dying had their best years in a decade, and a meaningful portion of those new players stayed. Participation has been higher across the last several years than it was through the 2000s. But the structural fact underneath the industry did not change. That surge in demand met a supply of courses that had been shrinking for 15 years, which is exactly why the survivors did so well. The correction is what made the recovery possible. The courses that died are the reason the ones that lived are full. At the same time, the operators who adapted did it by changing what they were actually selling. They shortened it, offering 9 holes and 6-hole loops for people who do not have 5 hours. They lit driving ranges and turned them into evening entertainment venues with music and food, where the golf is almost incidental. They leaned hard into weddings and corporate events, turning the clubhouse into the primary business and the course into the view. They installed tracking technology and simulators that generate revenue in February. The underlying idea is simple, even if executing it is expensive and slow. A golf course used to sell golf. The ones that survived started selling a reason to be on the property, whether or not you ever picked up a club. So does owning a golf course actually work as a business? The honest answer depends entirely on which course, and the gap between the good outcome and the bad outcome is enormous. In the optimistic scenario, you own a well-located course, with a full membership, a healthy waiting list, a clubhouse booking weddings 40 weekends a year, a busy range, a strong outing calendar, and enough water to run it. Dues arrive every month, regardless of weather, cart, and range revenue scales with good days. Food and beverage margins carry the whole operation, and the land underneath you appreciates because it is 150 acres of open space inside a growing area. This is the outcome that makes people fall in love with the business, and it is real. In the realistic bad year scenario, it rains through the best 6 weekends of the season. Rounds drop 15%, while maintenance costs do not drop at all because the grass grew anyway. A hot, dry August finishes off the irrigation main you were planning to replace next year, and the emergency repair costs $300,000 you did not budget. 20 members do not renew, and the ones who stay vote against a dues increase. Insurance is up, water is up. The equipment lease renews at a higher rate. And every single one of those things happens in the same 12 months, because they are all downstream of the same weather and the same aging property. Neither scenario is exotic or theoretical. Both of them happen constantly across the same industry, sometimes to the same property a decade apart. The land does not change. The economics underneath it do. A golf course looks, from the road, like a business made of grass and leisure. From the inside, it is a farm with a bar attached, where the crop must be perfect every single day, costs nothing to keep alive except everything you have, and produces income only when the sky permits. And the thing you are actually selling was never the golf. It was the 4 hours somebody chose to spend on your land instead of anywhere else.